Welcome to the Baggataway Podcast, episode number 4. We launch in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back. I'm the mayor, Gary Boylan, here with MLL All-Star Stephen Brooks, and boy, do we have something special for you guys. There's no way around it. This guest that we have on for an hour special is an absolute legend of the game. He's on the Mount Rushmore of lacrosse. If you were to pick out one person over the last 20 years in lacrosse who's helped the game expand and been a catalyst for its growth, it's this man, and his name is Bill Tierney. We'll get into his bio here in a minute, but Bill Tierney, to sum him up for those of you guys that don't know the name, he's the godfather of modern defense. He's the type of coach that every young player dreams that they could play for. He's had nothing but success, winning 7 national championships and a gold medal coaching Team USA. And he was the first coach to take a school in a state not touching the Atlantic Ocean to a national championship, which he did at the University of Denver. When we decided to do this podcast, Brooks and I were throwing names around, and he was the first one on our list. Not only is because he has such a rich tradition, and he's been in the Northeast where obviously there's a strong tradition of the game, but he's built tradition. So he's gone to schools who maybe had a little bit of tradition, maybe didn't have a lot of tradition, and he's really cultivated that. And that's what we talk about, the sport growing and building history. So, sit back and relax, and when this one's done, I guarantee you're going to be sending this to some friends, to your teammates, to some former coaches, letting your kids listen to this as well. I almost think it should be required listening to learn more about the game for some of those newer players. In 1994, funny story, my uncle actually lived in Princeton, New Jersey, where Coach Tierney was at the time, and they won the national championship that year, and my first game I ever watched was on ESPN. It was that NCAA championship, and afterwards my uncle sent me a fiddlestick, an orange fiddlestick with Princeton on it, and a 1994 championship hat, and I told Coach when we got him on, I would throw on the 1994 Princeton National Championship hat. I still have it. And it really got me into the game. And, I thank Coach for that. I'm really, really glad I did. And for those of you just falling in love with the game, like Brooksy and I have already done, welcome aboard. It's a fun ride, beautiful sport, and no one better to have on to talk about it than Coach Tierney. So with no further ado, let's dive into the interview. Okay, we're here with Coach Bill Tierney. I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version because his bio is so long. I think most of you guys do know, most of his coaching career. But as a player in 1973, won a USILA championship with Cortland. At 31, I think, Coach became the head coach of RIT. Twice going to the NCAA tournament and won the D3 Coach of the Year in 1983. Went on to join Johns Hopkins as an assistant and won 2 national titles. And then took off for Princeton, where he turned their program into a national power, winning 6 titles in 9 years and 8 national finals, and again, Coach of the Year in 1992. Won the gold medal in 1998 with Team USA, and in 2010 took over the Denver program, where he took them to their first tournament win and then 4 semifinals in 6 years, including a national championship. Currently, they are 5th in the country, and this is your 8th season at Denver. Coach, we really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. It's really, it's really cool to see, guys like yourselves that are so involved in the sport and still willing to listen to old timers like me. So I appreciate being on.
So one of the first questions, Coach, we have for you, what got you into the game?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, coming out of high school, I had been so influenced in my younger life by my coaches of whatever. I played whatever sport I could play, came from a very athletic family, and so always had great coaches, men that I knew would influence me in my life. So I went to Cortland State. I wanted to be a physical education teacher and coach, and my goal was to be my high school football coach someday, which was kind of a pipe dream, but I eventually became that. And but by the time I did that I graduated from college in 1973, and by the time I did that in the fall of 1981, the lacrosse bug was deep inside of me, and my best friend in college, Ray Rostan, was leaving the lacrosse job at RIT to go over to Ithaca College to be the soccer and lacrosse coach over there. And so the opportunity came up, and we had 3 kids under 4 at the time, and I was making $19,000 at high school, and took the job for $16,000 at RIT, and just got going into it. But as far as the lacrosse part of it goes, the story goes, I played freshman football at Cortland, and then going into sophomore year, the head football coach thought maybe I was too small and too slow. I thought he was crazy, and now as I look back, he was totally right. And I'm thankful for that meeting that day, because that made me a believer that if I was going to, do anything in sports, in college sports, I needed to focus on lacrosse, and went to work. And, I became a passion, still coached football, still coached a lot of other things, was a wrestling coach, a girls basketball coach, and then at Hopkins I had to coach soccer of all things. But
we'll get into that, Coach. We'll get into that later.
Yeah. But anyway, I just got the passion for lacrosse, and as you guys know, it's such a great game. It's an attractive game to young men and young women of any shape, size, and skill, and so got into it, and it's been a lifelong obsession with me ever since.
So when you took the job at RIT for your first head coaching job, what was your vision for your career?
My vision for my career was, and I'm sure we'll get into this later, was in a stupidly confident way, was to be the best I could be, and hopefully coach at Hopkins or Virginia someday. And we started on that tour, and had 3 good years at RIT, and got the opportunity to go to Hopkins after that. But, the goal, it's interesting because the first goal is always to win the next game, and it's still that goal. But, you always have your sights on being the best you can be in whatever career you choose.
So as a young coach, coaching college players, when you're less than, I guess 10 years older than your seniors, what is it like to coach them in college, and what is that relationship like? Obviously, as an older coach, when you're coaching the young guys and you have a storied career and resume, it's much easier. But how do you demand that respect, and especially with no past coaching experience, how do you really pull that out of the players?
Well, thankfully, I had 2 young men, Ed Purcell and Tommy Sill, who played for me at Levittown Memorial, and then, as I mentioned earlier, my best friend in college, Ray Rostan, was the coach at RIT, so he recruited some of my guys, and then he left. So they were actually, Tommy and Ed were freshmen at RIT, so I kind of had a little bit of, whether you call it respect or knowledge about or whatever. And so those guys knew me. I didn't get the job until December and didn't start the job until February 1st. But Tom and Ed, laid the groundwork for me with the guys. And then, it's a funny story. When I got to RIT, the first night of practice, because of course it was freezing cold and we weren't going to go outside, so we practiced in the gym at 10 at night, and I walked up the stairs from my office and I looked at this motley crew, and I called Tommy and Eddie over, and they were just freshmen, but I said to them, I'm going to walk downstairs for 10 minutes. You tell any guy in this room that has a bandana or his shorts over his sweats that he's cut. And so I walked downstairs, came back 10 minutes later. Guys looked good, and we started on the journey together, and continues to this day.
Wow.
That's great. When you were coaching at RIT on your 3rd year, and then you went over to Hopkins, you say that the dream was always to coach Virginia or Hopkins, but what's the reasoning behind wanting to coach at those 2 schools, and what was the biggest attraction to going to a school like Hopkins and leaving RIT?
Well, again, I was blessed to have somebody at Hopkins be my be my agent, so to speak. I had won. We had done real well at RIT in '84. We had made the national semifinals, lost to a great Hobart team, but played well all year. I think we only lost a couple of games that year. And Larry Quinn, who grew up around the corner from me in Levittown, and our parents were best of friends, and was my goalie at Levittown before I went to RIT, was going to be a senior goalie at Hopkins the following year. And then, so he was kind of an advocate for me. I had just come off that Coach of the Year season, and Don Zimmerman was being elevated from the assistant coach to the head coach at Hopkins, because Henry Ciccarone had left, retired from Hopkins in coaching. So it was a great opportunity for me to come in as the assistant, even though I was a year or two older than Zim. I had a lot to learn, and so when that opportunity came up, there's just no way I could pass on it. Hopkins was the king of the castle there, and the game, and for me to be able to just work there, I didn't care what I did, was an amazing opportunity. So. Made that decision actually in March of '84, told my RIT team before our season even started, but those guys were great. They played well all year for me, and they knew I was leaving at the end, but it was a great send-off and a great career, and there for 3 years, and then got to go to Hopkins for 3.
Coach, when you went over to Hopkins, like you said, storied program, Freddie Smith was there. You're known as kind of the godfather of the modern defense. I mean, I think everybody looks at you and kind of tries to build off of what you've done. What was it like as a young coach going into that type of a program and having the intentions to instill, kind of your philosophies, but kind of almost having to wait your turn and not step on toes? What was that like?
No question. A couple of funny stories. When as I said, I got hired in March, but I had to play my season out at RIT. And interestingly enough, Hopkins was going to play Syracuse, and so they asked me to go scout Syracuse in the Dome. And so I went to the game. I was all excited. I hadn't done anything, and then I got to a meeting at Hopkins, and the first question they asked me is, does Syracuse still run spaghetti? And I looked at him. I mean, we're talking about, back then there was no limitation on coaches. There was 9 coaches in the room. All of them had gone to Hopkins. All of them were great players and great coaches there. And I'm looking at them, and I said, what's spaghetti? And I could just see them all looking around the room like, we hired this jerk. He doesn't even know what spaghetti is. And then, the next, then fast forward, and I'm sure you're going to ask me this about my soccer coaching, but fast forward my first, spring at Hopkins, again, I didn't want to step on anybody's toes, and Zim said to me, Bill, you're going to run the box. And I'm like, there was 9 coaches, as I mentioned, all had gone to Hopkins, and I'm saying, Zim, I don't want to step on anybody's toes and take a job from anybody. I'm just happy to be here. But and they all started laughing because the game of lacrosse. Nobody wants to work the box,
right? Of course not.
So, and you mentioned Freddie Smith, and I'm glad you did, because Freddie Smith is the man that I learned the most lacrosse from. Of anybody in my life, and Freddie and I were together for 3 years. He was basically the defensive coordinator for the first 2, and then my third year in 1987, when we were fortunate to win a national championship that year, I had taken over as the defensive coordinator because Freddie was sick, and he had eventually died that summer. And so, when you talk about the defensive stuff and all that, basically what I did was, when I was at RIT and at Levittown, I believed that, we were double teaming guys from behind. We were actually turning them in what I would consider now the wrong direction. We were turning everybody toward the middle of the field, but we were doubling them so quickly. And then listening to Freddie for 2 years teach me about, the angles and driving guys down the side. But at Hopkins, they didn't slide unless they had to. So I kind of took these 2 ideas and put them together with Freddie's blessing. And I'll still remember to this day, Freddie gave me the greatest compliment anybody ever did. We were sitting in a meeting. In fact, we were going to play Syracuse in the national championship in 1985, and we had one of our defensemen wasn't a great cover guy, and of course, Syracuse had these great attackmen, and so I kind of sheepishly put my hand up in the meeting, and I said, well, why don't we just kind of throw in a fake zone, like whenever Syracuse gets the ball, let's just kind of pack it in a little bit, throw our sticks up in the air and yell out zone, and see what the reaction is, so that we had this one guy that was going to have trouble covering their guy. And so, of course, 8 of the 9 of them looked at me again like the spaghetti story and said, you're out of your mind, shut up, go back to picking up the balls after practice. And Freddie, this was the end of my first year, Freddie stood up and he said, it's about time we start listening to this guy. He knows what he's talking about.
Wow.
And to me, that was my real verification that I could be a pretty good coach, and we did that in the game. I don't know if it had any effect on it, but the Syracuse guys kind of pulled it out, and they scored the first 3 goals on us in the first 3 minutes of the game, and 2 of them were scored by long sticks, and one of my favorite guys ever, Fred Opie, and then things settled down, and we kind of did that in and out, and I'd like to think it helped a little bit, but we ended up winning the game 11-4 for the national championship up at Brown. This was before Final Fours, but Freddie Smith is the man that, to me, certified me as a coach.
You say you coached soccer and other sports while you were coaching lacrosse as well in college. How did coaching those other sports transition to lacrosse? Did you take anything from the other sports that you used to coach or philosophies and then transition that to lacrosse?
Yeah, a lot of things. The only other sport I coached in college was that soccer at Hopkins, but prior to that, when I was coaching on Long Island in Levittown, in fact, my last high school coaching game that I ever coached was with the girls basketball team, and I tell this story often because it allows me to look in the mirror and be very humbled. The last girls basketball game and last high school game of anything I ever coached, my team lost 72-4.
Man.
We scored the first basket of the game and the last basket of the game. A 72-point run to Westbury High School. So that experience, even though I wasn't very good at it, allowed me always allows me to be reminded that I'm not only as good a coach as my players are and my assistant coaches are. And so when I had to try to get the job at Hopkins, I had to kind of tell Bob Scott, the great AD at Hopkins, kind of a little white lie, and said I had a little bit of soccer experience. The truth of the matter is that at RIT, my office mate was a great guy named Doug May, and he was the soccer coach. And so took over the soccer job from Zim, and thankfully Hopkins had only had like 1 winning year in 50 years of soccer, so I could only go up. The first year we were not very good, and then the last 2 years we were 14-3, and my third year we went into the NCAA tournament. And so again, moving on to Princeton, which I'm sure you'll ask me about, but I think it was the results of our soccer team. Obviously, Hopkins lacrosse was going to be great. We won 2 national championships out of the 3 years I was there, but it was the soccer turnaround that I think helped us at Princeton. But, back to your question, I think it did help me a great deal to coach some sports that I didn't know much about, because you learn to rely on the guys. The soccer guys at Hopkins were fabulous kids, a lot of pre-med, a lot of engineering guys. And the first meeting I just said to them, guys, I don't know anything about soccer, but I can tell you I can get you in shape and I can give great halftime talks, And so if you guys bear with me, I mean, we did a lot of lacrosse drills, and these guys are looking at me like I'm crazy. We did like line drills and transition drills and all these things. And then I learned some things for them. And I think the biggest thing I learned from those guys was, if you trust your players and they trust you, anything is possible.
Wow. So, Coach, I'm a big soccer guy, so I love it. I was talking to Steven, who also loves soccer, and we were joking about what your formation was. He thinks it might have been like an 8-2. What was your what was your go-to? Are you a 4-4-2 guy?
My go-to was a 4-4-3 because we had two outside midfielders that could just fly, and so I asked the kids what should we be. We had a good center midfielder, so we kind of played in offense, defense, center midfielders, and then two guys on the wings that just took off anytime we wanted it. But I tell you about the defensive side of it, I wasn't into any of this really, the niceties of the triangle passing at the defensive end. I had two rules that I gave them that they had to follow. At the defensive end, if the ball was at your feet and you were inside the 18, you kicked it as far as
I like that. I like it.
My other rule from the lacrosse side of it is it drove me crazy is that we get the ball, we get upfield, and these guys would send crossing passes like 20 yards away from the goal. So our rule was you had to get within 5 yards of the end line before you sent a crossing pass, which to me was as close as getting in lacrosse behind the goal as you possibly could.
Yeah.
I was always a get the ball behind goal guy in lacrosse, and so those crossing passes were always curling back towards your face as an offensive player, as opposed to the defense having to now turn and see where it was. So we kind of made a living off of that with some great kids that also knew all the other intricacies of the game, whether it was the trap or what I would call the ride, and it would drive them nuts. But I got some great advice from Tony Seaman, who's a great friend, because he was a really good high school soccer coach. I asked him what it was, what lacrosse was like. He said, just think of it as a giant ride and clear. And it's kind of what we did. And at Hopkins was cool because we had the old AstroTurf. So the soccer ball would just move so quickly. And then I got John and James DiTomaso to be my ball boys on the side. So they would throw perfect passes to my guys when it would go out of bounds.
Oh, that's great.
And then throw it over the heads of our opponents. So it worked out pretty good.
Well, you never know, Coach. If you had ended up at UVA, the Bruce Arena and Dom Starsia relationship, you might be coaching the men's national team right now for soccer.
Well, I'll tell you a funny thing about that. I called Bruce Arena because I knew Bruce. Bruce and I grew up on Long Island together at the same time. He went to Cary High School. I went to Levittown Memorial, and he was the only guy I knew in soccer, so I called him up and asked him how to defend corner kicks. And he said, and I'll never forget, he just said to me, Coach, you figure it out.
Oh, that's great.
That's another good answer. And then when I went to Princeton, my best friend at Princeton was Bob Bradley, who became the national team coach. And now, so he and Bruce were best friends because they were at Virginia together. And so I have this intertwining relationship with these guys in the soccer world. And so it's been a blessing to have those guys around.
Well, you say you didn't have much of a soccer background before. If you just dropped those names,
Yeah.
I feel like you would have been okay.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's awesome. Yeah. So one of the things before we dive into Princeton, Coach, is we interviewed your nephew Seth, who's having a great year right now. But he told us offline a little recruiting story about how you got him to go to Hopkins, and it's a golden story. I didn't know if you wanted to share it with our listeners, but we really enjoyed it.
Why don't you share it, and then I'll tell you how much of it is true.
All right, go ahead, Steven. Go ahead.
So rumor has it is that you were recruiting him heavily to come to Hopkins, and he thought to himself, how great would it go play for my uncle at Hopkins? And long story short, turns out that when he was going into his freshman year, you just left Hopkins to go to Princeton.
Yeah, well, what did he say? He said you recruited him, and he said, "Hey, I want you to come to Hopkins." You were telling him, in your brother's house, and he said, "Sure, I'd love to play for you. Thanks, Uncle Bill." And he goes, "Well, you're not playing for me. I'll be at Princeton, but you'll be you'll be at Hopkins."
Well, it went something like that, but the interesting part of it was, the way I had to break it to him is, look, Seth, I'm going to Princeton, and neither you or I were smart enough to get in there.
Yeah, he did say that. I didn't want to throw him under the bus, but that was part of the story.
And so he went to Hopkins and had a great career, and I'm proud of him for that.
So, Coach, when you first arrived on campus at RIT, Princeton, and now Denver, where each school has varying levels of success, did you change the philosophy to meet their culture, or did you change their culture with your philosophy?
Well, that's a great question. When you're a young coach, it's kind of my way or the highway. And I think what I was blessed with at RIT, Ray Rostand got that program going, but he never reaped the rewards of the great recruiting he did and the great kids he brought in. And so at RIT, as I mentioned before, the thing that I brought from Levittown with me was, because if you know anything about Levittown, is if you don't have discipline, the inmates are going to run the asylum. And so when I got to RIT, it was easy for me because Ray had developed some good talent, but the discipline part needed to kind of be enhanced. And so we put, as I mentioned about the bandanas and the shorts over the sweats and all those things, we just, instituted some discipline into the program. And that carried with me, up until my Princeton days. I had only worked any job for like 3 years. So I was kind of known as a guy that's going to come in and rattle some fences, but make it become a disciplined program. So when I got to Princeton, and Princeton had a glorious history in lacrosse, but it just wasn't a recent history. It was the same thing. And I actually did a speech yesterday at the U.S. Olympic training site down here at Colorado Springs to the U.S. Olympic swimming coaches and all the coaches that have young people on the Olympic teams, and they asked me a similar question, and I've always believed, and I continue to believe, that if there's one thing you got to bring to a program, it's discipline. And so we did that at all those places, and thankfully all those places when I got there had been underachieving, and so putting discipline in it to me was the consistency of all three of those programs. When I came here, it was a similar situation, a lot of talent, but things had gone amok a little bit, and they're great kids. They just needed to know what the parameters were and go by them. And so I'd say, you asked it in a much more eloquent way than I could ever answer it, but that's the thing. Now, the defensive system, when I got to Princeton, we just didn't have enough talent to play the same defense that Hopkins played, and so I just said, screw it, I'm going to institute the enhancement of what I thought Hopkins did, and put in the quick sliding stuff and all that. It took us a couple of years to get going with it, but in '92 when we won our first championship, I think it had really helped people. People either weren't respecting it or didn't quite figure out what we were doing yet. So in one way, I'd say I brought the system and tried to change the culture to be a disciplined one at all the places. But I can tell you at Denver here, and I give all the credit in the world to Matt Brown for this, is we got a different kind of guy here. And we did institute the discipline side of it when it came to how guys acted and what they did on and off the field, what we looked like when we travel, the expectations of going to class and all that stuff. But what Matt convinced me as the years have gone on here is that there's a different way to skin the cat, and you don't always have to win games by holding teams to 4 or 5 goals. That you can outscore teams, and we've been blessed with some great talent through Matt's recruiting, both in Canada and the United States, and kind of developed into an offensive team that I've had some great defensive coordinators already here. My son Trevor, and then Dylan Sheridan, who's now the head coach. And by the way, now 2 days into being the father of my 3rd grandchildren, because he married my daughter.
Congratulations!
Thank you. And now John Orson, who's phenomenal defensive coach. But our philosophy here is a little bit more offensive, pushing the ball, playing a little faster and a little smarter, and scoring goals. So I think I've changed. A few years ago, I did a talk at the coaches convention, and I called it "Square Peg in a Round Hole." And I tried to explain to 1,000 young coaches, don't do what I did. Don't try to force your system onto kids. Be flexible with their abilities. I think the greatest coaches out there are the ones who can assess what their team's skills are, assess what the personality of the team is, from a athletic and skill standpoint, and then develop what your team is going to be like, and of course, keeping to the things you believe in, which I always believed in defense. But so I hope that answered your question. But certainly in the last 8 years, and I think if there's anything that's said about me in history, it'll be that he had a system, but he was willing to change.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Discipline is a very important thing. I'm learning I'm going to be 33 this year, and I've been coaching high school lacrosse ever since I graduated. But that's something I try to follow as well. It's discipline. If you can get guys to buy into who you are and make them trust you, then you can turn right around and trust them into the system and just getting them as disciplined as they possibly can. So better off lacrosse, and the product that you're trying to get across is going to come off a lot better.
And I've always said that, and that's absolutely true. What I've always said is coaches lose games, players win them. And so that if you always remind your kids when they have a great game, you guys did great. You guys won the game. You guys did everything. And then when you lose a tough one, take it upon yourself to eat the defeat, because they'll then believe in you more. So then when you do the real discipline stuff, and I believe that discipline is a great safety net for young people these days. 3/4 of them have excuses made for them, even if they do something minor, in error. And so they need to hear the word no. They need to be disciplined about things. I have 34 or something years of college coaching, and every one of my players has run a mile every Monday of our practices. And I talked to my sons who played for me, and we're celebrating the 25th anniversary this spring of our first Princeton championship. When you mention the words Monday mile, they all kind of cringe, and yet still to this day, we do it here at Denver. I still believe that that's something you can fall back on. It's something they hate, and yet something that they take great pride in later on, to say they have a brotherhood of 30 some odd years of guys who run a Monday mile. It's pretty cool.
One of the things, Coach, if you really look at your career, is the sustained success. A lot of people have peaks and valleys, or they have really good runs. At one point in Princeton, while you were there, you won 6 national championships in 9 years, and at Denver, in your first 6, you were in 4 Final Fours. A lot of the kids today have the success, and then they ride it. They kind of say, oh, great, I got a ring, or oh, great, we had a really good year. How do you get them to come back bought in and ready to go the second year? Because that's always the toughest, to repeat or to win one within the next 2 or 3 years. And you do it year after year. Your kids are always ready to go. Is there a coaching secret?
It's not a secret. I think it's just reminding kids that whatever whether it's a high school team or a college team, that the window of opportunity is very short. And so in 4 years, only 4 teams throughout that one kid's career is going to win a national championship. And so what I always say to our sophomores, juniors, and seniors that have won one is that you guys got to give the freshmen the opportunity to win theirs. And so, you're right, as you mentioned, from 92 and for a long time through Princeton, a lot of kids came through and won national championships, and I remember being at Hopkins, and them talking about like 100 years of guys that at least won one. And so I'm not a big quote guy, or I don't read a lot of motivation books, but one quote that always stood out to me was one that Bill Parcells said, and I have it right in front of me because it reminds me every day of just what you're asking. And real simply, it goes like this: you wake up each morning knowing the game is all that matters. If you fail in it, nothing you've done in your life counts. By your very nature, you always have to start all over again fresh. It's an uncomfortable feeling, but it's nonetheless addictive. Even if everyone around you tells you you're a success, you seek out that uncomfortable place. And if you don't win, you're on the wrong side of the thin curtain that separates losers from winners. And to me, that says everything. It's like I wake up in the morning, it doesn't matter who we beat the other day, it's the next game. And if you fail in that game, you're a failure until the next game. And so now I try not to make it that definitive and that hard on my players, and that's why I think you have to go with the mantra of players win and coaches lose. But that's kind of how I lived my coaching life, and I want every kid to know that I believe that he can reach the pinnacle, even if we're not very good. My first team at Princeton was 2-13, and we weren't very good, but we talked about national championships from day one there, and we continue to do that throughout my time here at Denver.
Wow. Well, I can see how your kids have all gotten into coaching. Coaching your sons, I believe the stat is that you're the only coach to have coached two sons in the same team to win a national championship. It's one of those ESPN just dig up stats, but I think it's pretty cool. I mean, I've coached my little brother, and I know how difficult it is coaching your son. It's nice when your sons are that talented, and I know your son has been coaching with you. What is it like to see them play the game, and what is it like to see them on the sideline? I believe your daughter also coaches in high school.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of coaches in our family. My, first of all, going back to your first question, people ask me, I've been very blessed to have been a part of, if you count my winning a national championship in my senior year, and then the 2 at Hopkins, and then the 7 subsequent ones, I've been a part of a lot of very, very fortunate teams. But I can tell you that 2001 with Trevor and Brendan both on the field still gives me chills. And it was just a moment in time that's so surreal. And I know when Coach Danowski won with Matt at his side, I called him and just try to discuss it with him, and Matt playing with him, playing for one, and all that stuff. I think Matt played for one, but I know he's coached with him for a couple, and that it's such an amazing feeling to have that. I think with my children growing up, coaches, my smartest son, my son Brendan, who's out in Oregon, he works for Nike out there. He even dabbled with some high school coaching, but now that he's got 2 kids, he's out of it. But the other 3, Trevor was with me. He's out of coaching now too. He's got his master's, finish up his master's from Harvard in developmental psychology. He runs a developmental company that's doing great stuff. And then my oldest daughter, Courtney, still coaches high school basketball in New Jersey. And then Brian, Dylan Sheridan's wife, is trying to get back into the college coaching thing. So they've all been in it, and I hope it's for other reasons than I did it. For me, it was I don't know what else I could do, So they're certainly smarter, and more talented than I. And we've just been blessed to have a great, some great things happen to our family through athletics, whether it be through playing or coaching. But that moment in 2001 at Rutgers was very, very special.
So, Coach, you coached, at Princeton, like we'd said, and now out at Denver, which is a non-traditional power. Obviously, now you guys are perennially in the top 5, winning national championships, and constantly a threat to win the next one. What was more difficult to recruit to? An Ivy League school where obviously most kids, 99% of kids can't get in, or is it to bring them out west? I know you've had that Canadian pipeline, and it's probably an unfair question now because everyone wants to go there. But when you first went to Denver in 2010, did you find that it was tough to recruit out west?
It's interesting. I think lacrosse affords us all an opportunity that I've certainly recognized, and I hope all college coaches recognize, is that we're in a unique thing where it's kind of a seller's market. There are more good kids out there playing, and then you throw in the Canadian guys and the native guys and all the kids that are playing in the States. There are more good kids playing than there are spots. So the idea in recruiting is to know who you are. And I always kind of equate Princeton and Denver in this way. At Princeton, when I watched kids play, I knew that only 30% of them could possibly get in admissions wise with the standards of that. So I didn't waste my time on I hated it. I hated passing on some great kids, but I didn't waste my time recruiting kids that I knew I couldn't get in, and some phenomenal kids. And then, so what we concentrated on then were the guys that we knew academically we could get in, and tried to find the 10 best ones every year. And I give a lot of the credit to that to Coach Metzbauer, David Metzbauer, who was my assistant for 20 years at Princeton and now is at Carolina and helped lead them to a championship last year. He was our main recruiter and did a phenomenal job. And then out at Denver, what we did was we kind of took that 30% mantra and said, there's only 30% of the kids in the States who will come here. Let's concentrate on them. And so very quickly we say we want young men that want to be pioneers, and we use that word in a lot of different ways. We use it in a way where, yes, it's our mascot. We want kids that want to be Denver Pioneers, but also that use the pioneer side of the thing of the California kid who or the Washington kid or the Oregon kid who doesn't want to, who's pioneer enough to say, I don't have to go to one of the big Eastern powers, or an Eastern kid who's pioneer enough to say, I don't have to go to one of these Eastern powers. I think it might be pretty cool to go out to Denver, even though it's 1,800, 2,000 miles away, and do something a little different in a place that has, mountains and great lacrosse opportunities, and is one of the 2 or 3 furthest west schools there is out there, and so we kind of built it upon that. And then, of course, Matt Brown, with his connections in Canada, has brought us some of our, if not all of our greatest players, certainly a good majority of them, and mix that in. So I think no matter where you're at, you got to figure out what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and not waste time trying to convince a young person that who's been dreaming about going to one of those great schools out east that this is right for him. Instead, find that kid who's a great player and has a little bit of twinkle in his eye. It says, I want to do something a little different. Now it changes. Just like I remember in 1992, we had a young man named Mike Mariano who came into the press conference after our championship game in 92, and somebody asked him a similar question about why did you come to Princeton instead of one of the powers, and he said his quote was, "Dynasties are boring." And then 10 years later, when Trevor wins in 2001, and he was asked, well, why'd you come to Princeton? He said, well, because I knew I had a shot at winning a national championship here.
Wow.
So you have a change, you morph over those 10 years, and the same thing here at Denver. We're kind of at the beginning. It was that pioneer thing. We want to be the first team, from not touching the Atlantic Ocean to win a national championship, and we became that 2 years ago. Now we want to continue this opportunity, as you guys so nicely mentioned, that it is a team that they can play on, that the kids can at least say, hey, it may be out west, but I got a chance at playing for a championship. And so you kind of got to change your sales pitch, but also know who you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no
I mean,
question.
most people don't know this, but I was verbally committed to Denver to go out there and play and follow one of my good friends that I grew up playing lacrosse with in high school that was out there a year ahead of me, that actually played with Brownie. But that was one of the main reasons that attracted me to Denver, is that, not a lot of people gave me chances, but Denver knocked on my door, and I said, you know what, I would love to go out west and try to change something, like you say, become a pioneer, try to change a culture around it at a program and try to make a powerhouse out of it. But, that's something.
We wish you had come.
Sometimes I look back and say, man, what would have happened? But, unfortunately, my path went in the direction. It's been a dream of mine to always play at Syracuse, growing up watching them, and watching Syracuse play Princeton. I mean, those are fond memories in my head, because I can only record the games on VHS, because in Illinois, that's only on the Final Four is the only lacrosse that I was able to watch, and I always had practice. And right away when I got home from practice, I would put that VHS tape in and watch it, and it was always between Princeton and Syracuse, which is pretty cool. And now I have that opportunity to talk to you and hear your philosophies. It's really cool, and it's really cool for me personally to get an opportunity to hear more about who you are as a coach and your philosophies and your style.
Well, thanks for saying so. As I don't know if you guys have ever read who John McPhee is, but John's a Pulitzer Prize winning writer he's written books. He wrote Bill Bradley's book, but he wrote an article in the New Yorker magazine. He and I became great friends at Princeton, and our first game, he took a bus up to Syracuse for our first game here at Denver, and we got, we were down 7-0 with about 2 minutes, but John wrote a great story in the New Yorker magazine about if you ever, it's a short, but if you ever want to read a cool story, because it kind of told my story of my really in my heart, and I can say this, my love-hate relationship with the Syracuse people, my love relationship and respect relationship with Coach Simmons and Coach Desko, but the fans there, they didn't like me very much, and so the gist of the story was that how nice the Syracuse fans were to me my first 2 years when we came from Denver out there, because they beat our bloody brains in, and don't worry, Coach, it'll be okay, and all that. And so I won't use the words that John wrote in his article, but the words pretty strong, that I wanted to come back someday and have the fans at Syracuse hate me again, because that would mean that we're doing pretty well. So it's kind of always have had a great relationship with those guys, even though we played against each other, I think, in like 9 of 10 Final Fours over the course of those years.
So with all those championships that you've won, and a lot of those games were either 1-goal games or overtime games, do any of those national championships, does one stick out in your mind?
Well, I'd be a liar, and again, as I mentioned before, the 2001 one with my 2 boys, but on the field, that was, as I mentioned, that was really special, from a selfish standpoint. The other ones, we were watching there. Somebody posted in the last week or so kind of a highlight film of the 92 championship, and God, we were the bad news bears, but we had a great goalie and a great face-off guy, and Kevin Lowe was a great attackman, and we somehow ended up winning that championship game, and that was very, very special. But and then winning the one here with the greater meaning to the lacrosse world of it, to me, again, it meant a championship with a great group of young men who had tried very hard. The guys before it had strived for that. We made a couple of Final Fours that people didn't predict, but and that those 2 first ones were special. But I can also tell you, I ran into Jesse Hubbard a couple of weeks ago. Those 3 in a row, 96, 97, 98. The 94 was very unlikely one. So it's really hard to put your finger on it, because I know the specialness it means to especially the seniors on those teams, but to everybody on those teams to know that we got one together. And so it's really hard to, because they were all, like you mentioned, 4 of the 7 as a head coach were overtime wins, and then a couple others we just played really well, like we did a couple years ago against Maryland.
So Coach, as we wrap up here, before we get into the funny questions, one of the things that we like to talk, so a lot of our listeners are potential college recruits or youth players, 7th, 8th grade. We wanted to kind of hear from the college coaches what they think the players should be doing to get better and to get recruited, because everybody thinks it's highlight video online, done, or 95 prospect days. What do you want to see a kid? We've seen you out in the recruiting circuit over the summer. What do you look for in a kid, and what should they be doing to get seen without obviously overdoing it? Is it multiple sports? Is it not burning out? Talk a little bit about what you're looking for in a player and what you think they should be kind of striving to do before they get to high school ball or in high school ball.
It's a great question, and it's the gist of what we're all trying to go through. But the first thing that popped in my head when you started asking the question, to me, they should all be playing box lacrosse until they're 13. It's so clear and so evident to me, the skill development that happens. We started our spring box lacrosse. We run a little spring box lacrosse thing around here that, Matt Brown and his US Box LA program is going to just make our country a better lacrosse playing country, because the skill development, in an hour and a half of box lacrosse, a kid touches the ball about 100 times. In an hour and a half of a field lacrosse practice, a kid touches the ball an average of 25 or 30 times.
Yeah.
And so just that in itself. So that's the first part. But as far as getting into the recruiting thing, there's no one answer. There's a lot of talk about the early recruiting and all that stuff, and I have mixed feelings about that. But the bottom line for kids, and Stephen, you did this, I'm sure, a million times, and it's so simplistic, is if you have a passion for this thing, it's got to be an hour a day on the wall. It's got to be shooting, and then as you get older, certainly the athletic development and the strength development. Getting out there is important, but and we're all very hypocritical as lacrosse coaches, because we all talk to the media about we love multi-sport athletes, and then what do? We recruit ninth graders that are bigger than other kids in ninth grade, and so that happen to be specializing in lacrosse at a young age. But and that's what makes the sport great. You're looking at in a week now. You look at the rankings of who's up there and who's in the top 20 now. Everybody's path to success isn't recruiting 14-year-olds, and so I think what I would say to young people is, if you have the passion for this, you've got to be so dedicated, and if it means that you got to take your Xbox and throw it in the garbage, you want to be great, that you might have to do that.
Amen.
And certainly the whole thing, the great thing, one of the greatest things about lacrosse is 90% of the schools that play it are very good academic schools. You got to do your schoolwork. If you're a goof off, then don't try to be a great lacrosse player. And then, the other thing I think young people are making a mistake is the young commits, and I'm as guilty as anybody with this, but is that the mistake they're making is once they commit, they think they've achieved their goals, that's the beginning of the story. Because there are 50 guys on Division I lacrosse teams, and if you stop trying to improve in 9th or 10th grade, the other 49 are going to pass you by in a big time hurry. And so the passion for this thing has got to remain strong. Don't get burnt out on being cool, or don't choose schools because their colors are nice, or because your cousin went there. Make sure you're making the right decision for yourself, but also understand that there's so many places to play lacrosse now and be happy. The D1 thing, and you guys can address this as well as anybody, the D1 thing, it sounds really cool, but it's another job. And if you're serious about your academics, or you want to be a socialite in college, then you're not going to do, unless you do those things hand in hand and really mind your time well and understand that it's a job, then it's going to be a challenge for you. If you want to use lacrosse and you're a pretty good player, there are so many great players. There's so many kids right now playing college club lacrosse. It's phenomenal out there, and they're being played at some big-time schools. Certainly, the Division II to Division III levels. There are Division I athletes on all those teams. Just make your choice wisely, and understand that the Division I is an end-all, be-all, because there are guys on all our teams that are sitting on the bench for 4 years. And so there's so many things to consider when you're going out there getting recruited. I think right now the prospect days are the better way to go, because these tournaments with 200 teams at it, we just can't recruit at them anymore. They're worthless, because you're watching a kid for 20 minutes and it just doesn't work. I still like, as you guys know, myself, Tony Seaman, and Dave Cottle started Top 205 in 1987. We've closed it down now, but we went almost 30 years of being an individual recruiting camp. I believe in those, and I believe there are a couple of good ones out there now. I think there are a couple of bad ones out there now.
Yeah.
But, find your niche. But and to the parents, don't spend $20,000 over one summer when your son's in 9th grade to eventually get a $5,000 scholarship. It doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense. Put that money into SAT prep courses and good schooling and stuff, and love the fact that your son or daughter is playing a game that's really enjoyable to play. And then if you're a good player and you're a Division I type, very good player, people are going to find you, even if you're from Illinois.
That was great, Coach. I hope every parent listens to that and every player listens to that, because it's so well said.
One of the things I always try to tell these kids is, it's the 4-year plan is great, but it's more about the 40-year plan. What are you going to be able to do after you get out of college, and how you can use lacrosse as that avenue to get a great education and play the sport that you absolutely love. But what's more important is what are you going to do after lacrosse? What if that sport was taken away from you? What are you going to be still able to do? And the biggest thing that I see with these kids is that they have a tendency of burning out, or like you said, they do get recruited and then they stop after they commit. And it just shows to me that kids are just falling out of the love of the game. I mean, I remember distinctly coming home from soccer practice in the fall. I would immediately get home, eat dinner, do my homework, and then I would go out to my side of my house and I would shoot on a lacrosse goal until my neighbor, Mrs. Soling, would roll out her window and say, "Steven, go to bed." And it's like 9 o'clock at night and I got this one little light on and I'm just playing lacrosse. And I still do that to this day. My son is 2.5, and any opportunity I have to go outside in my backyard, I just bring a couple extra sticks out there for him if he wants to pick it up. But I'm addicted to the game. I love the game, and it's given me such a huge future that I just can't stop not falling in love with it. And I just want to instill that in my kids and the kids I coach. Is that it's a love. It's not something that should be pulled out of you. It's something that should just naturally come to you. You want to pick up a stick and you want to become a great person and you want to have great leaders. But most importantly, how can you use lacrosse as an avenue to get in education and have that education when you get out of school and have a great career?
Wow, that's so well said. And the only thing I would add to that is the people that you meet in this game. There's something special about the fiber of lacrosse people in general. And, you got kids getting jobs now out of college. Yes, through our networking and through our alumni, and thank God for that, but also through the kids we coach in our Denver Elite program and their parents being so impressed with our guys, so it's also the people, but, it's a passion and it's a great thing. And I think the world of lacrosse, it can be a great role model for others out there.
Well, thank you, Coach. So we're going to wrap up with 4 fun quick-fire questions. First one, real easy. Messi or Ronaldo?
Who?
Messi or Ronaldo? Come on, you're a soccer coach.
Holy crap. I have no idea.
I thought that was going to be an easy one. You're like, I got the soccer package on my on DirecTV.
How about I take Michael Bradley?
Oh, okay. All right.
I'll take that. Now, what is your favorite movie for road trips?
Oh, man. There's a lot of them, obviously. For me, I'm a little older than the guys, but I was always kind of like Mallrats. That was always.
I did not see that coming.
Did not see that coming, but I respect that because that is a great movie.
All right, so Coach, if you include your gold medal, if we count that as a ring, you're at 10 between playing and coaching. Where does the next one go? Are you going big toe? Are you going pinky? Where are you going to double up?
I'll tell you a funny story. In a couple of years ago, I played in the over 60 World Championships out here in Denver and won a gold medal. So I'll just put it around my neck.
That'll do.
That'll work. All right, the last question, Coach, we ask everybody. It's a random word generator, and we get 2 words. We get an adjective and we get a noun, and you have to give us first player, the first coach or teammate, friend, celebrity, whatever it may be that comes to mind with the 2 words, all right?
Just remember, I went to Cortland, so you got to help me with the...
They're easy. No, they're easy. You're good.
What an adjective and a noun is.
They're pretty easy. They're pretty easy. All right, here we go.
Yeah.
A rude ballerina.
Dave Coddles.
Oh, that's great. You got Brooks dying. he's loving it. Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, thank you very much, Coach. That was a blast. I mean, I think this is definitely one of those interviews that we want everyone to listen to. It's something that if you want to learn about the history of the game and the recent history of the game and where it's going, I mean, I think you absolutely nailed it. And we were thinking half an hour, but it's an hour, and I think it's worth every minute. We don't have to touch the audio.
It's a real true privilege to me, watching you coach over those years and getting to know you and having an opportunity to talk to you. Like I said before, it's a true honor to have this opportunity, and we can't thank you enough for finding time in your busy schedule to come on and talk to us.
Thank you, guys. I want you to know it's. Whenever I get these opportunities, you mentioned the 40-year thing, and it's so true. But I used to say to my players, I can't be your friend for the next 4 years so that I can be for the next 40. Now I kind of say I can't be your friend for the next 4 years so I can be for the next 20. So I'm a little bit more cognizant of all of our humanity and what this great game means to all of us. And I'm blessed to have guys like you continue to keep this game out there in front of people. And I'm blessed to be a small part of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Coach.
Thank you, Coach.
Thanks again to Coach Tierney. What an interview. I told you guys it was one of those ones you don't want to miss, and that you'd be sharing it. Those stories were great. I mean, who does the guy not know? So for those of you guys that are new to the Baggataway Podcast, you can find us on social media. On Twitter, we are Baggataway Pod. On Instagram, we are Baggataway Podcast. And if you want to shoot us an email, we are baggatawaypodcast@gmail.com. And help us get the word out. So if you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure you guys hit it up on Twitter. Make sure you follow us. Make sure you subscribe. And let your friends know. Because if we want to continue to get some of these great guests on, we have a wish list that we're trying to knock out one by one. And if we want to get some of these guests, we're going to need a bigger social media presence and a bigger fan base. So help us grow, and hopefully we can continue to bring you great content. You know what that whistle means. It's time to hear from our sponsors. So let's talk about one of our sponsors this week, Lax World. So you guys are playing right now. It stinks. You're breaking sticks. Maybe your cleats are getting a little uncomfortable. Maybe your pads are starting to stink. There's only one thing you can do. You go to laxworld.com. You look at their gear. You pick out maybe a new stick for the summer. Maybe you pick out a fresh new pair of kicks, and you get free shipping. So type in code BAGPOD, BAGPOD. Pick yourself up a new spoon. Pick yourself up a new pair of kicks. Pick yourself up a new pair of elbow pads. Free shipping, no minimums, BAGPOD, BAGPOD. Help the podcast and have the freshest gear. Our other sponsor is Bridget Partners. So Bridget Partners is an LED distributor. If you guys are looking to redo the office, maybe your school's looking to redo their lights, there's only one place to call. It's Bridget Partners. Their phone number is 703-713-5209. It's a pain in the butt to do yourself. The market's too big. You don't know where to go. A lot of LEDs out there are way too expensive. Some aren't even reliable. Who do you trust? You know what? Bridget Partners got your back. They'll do a free assessment. They'll help you get your lights. They'll install them for you. And you know what? It'll look good. 10-year warranties. Bada bing, bada boom. That number again is 703-713-5209, and tell them the Baggataway Podcast sent you.